I was looked down on and mocked by my husband's friends' wives. Not with words, at least not ones they would ever admit. It was in the flick of their eyes, across my simple shoes, in the half-smiles that never reached their eyes, in the way they turned their backs to me when they clustered together at gatherings. They saw me as small, the quiet wife who rocked her baby in the corner while they sipped wine and discussed Pilates instructors, European vacations, and the latest designer handbags, the one who didn't fit into their perfect, curated circle of women who seemed to exist in an unspoken competition of who could appear the most effortlessly elite. They didn't know me. They didn't know the life I had lived before moving here, or how hard I had worked to build the life I now lived quietly. They didn't know how many nights I stayed up studying in college, working shifts to pay for tuition, while others around me had parents wiring them rent and spending money. They didn't know the years I spent building a business, brick by quiet brick, while maintaining my dignity and refusing to bow to the flashy culture that screamed for attention. They only saw the quiet woman with a tired smile and a baby on her hip, wearing simple clothes, bringing store-brand snacks to potlucks, and speaking softly when asked a question. I didn't need their approval. That's what I told myself anyway. But it hurt more than I wanted to admit. To stand in a room full of people who laughed and shared stories, while I hovered at the edges, trying to be included only to be met with tight smiles and quick dismissals. I wasn't seeking validation. I had long learned how to be my own foundation. But being invisible, being made to feel less, was a sting I hadn't expected when my husband and I moved here to start our life together. He loved his friends, they were his brothers, men who had been with him through struggles and triumphs, who had lifted him up when he needed it most. It made sense he wanted me to love them, and their wives too. Give it time, he told me, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear one night after a gathering where I came home fighting tears. They'll come around. I nodded, trying to believe him, trying to believe that the polite nods and cold shoulders would one day turn into genuine conversations and laughter shared across coffee cups. But deep down I knew. They had made up their minds about me the moment they saw me, and it had nothing to do with who I was, and everything to do with what they thought I wasn't. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know I was the CEO of the very company some of their husbands worked for, the woman who signed off on promotions, who decided budgets and expansions, who made the calls that shaped careers. Because I never told them. I didn't need to. But as I stood there at those gatherings, watching them laugh while excluding me, I promised myself, one day they will know. Not because I would shout it in their faces, but because life has a way of revealing the truth at the perfect time. And when it came, they would remember the woman they thought was nobody. When we moved to this city, I truly believed we were stepping into a new season of promise. It was a fresh start, new streets to learn, new coffee shops to find, and new people to meet. Our baby was just 9 months old then, her giggles filling the quiet corners of our small townhouse, reminding us that life could be beautiful, even when we were exhausted beyond words. My husband was especially excited. This was the city where his closest friends lived, a tight-knit circle of 10 men who had been through career struggles, fatherhood, and life's unexpected storms together. You're going to love them, he told me one night, holding our daughter while she tugged at his hair. And their wives? I asked, half laughing, half hopeful. They're great too, he assured me, eyes bright. I wanted to believe him. Because, if I was honest, I was lonely. Motherhood, beautiful as it was, came with isolation. My days were filled with work deadlines, diaper changes, late-night feedings, and stolen naps in between conference calls. The loneliness was loud in the quiet moments, reminding me that in this new city, I had no one. So, when he told me we were invited to a dinner to meet his friends and their wives, I felt a flicker of hope. I spent the day getting ready, moving around the house with our baby on my hip, humming softly as I packed her diaper bag. I wore my simple navy dress, the one that always made me feel confident without trying too hard, pairing it with flats, because I knew I'd likely be chasing a crawling baby between conversations. As we drove to the dinner, my husband reached over, squeezing my hand. They're going to love you. I smiled, but inside, I felt the nervous flutter of wanting to belong, of wanting to find my place in this new chapter of our lives. The house was large, warm lights glowing through the windows, laughter spilling out onto the porch as we walked up. Inside, the men were loud, joking and clapping each other on the back, beers in hand, children running between them while the game played softly in the background. The wives were gathered near the kitchen island, glasses of wine in their manicured hands, their laughter quieter, more measured, their eyes scanning each new arrival. I took a deep breath, adjusted my baby on my hip, and walked over, offering a warm smile. "Hi, I'm so happy to meet you all." They turned, eyes flicking to me, polite smiles curving their lips. "Oh, hi," one of them said, lifting her glass slightly before turning back to her conversation. They didn't ask me questions. They didn't ask about the baby or where we had moved from. Instead, they continued talking about their yoga instructors, a new luxury spa opening downtown, and which country club offered the best tennis programs for their kids. I stood there, nodding when they glanced at me, gently bouncing my baby, while my husband laughed with his friends across the room. I told myself it was fine, that they didn't mean to exclude me, that maybe they were tired or distracted, that next time would be different. But as I stood there, feeling invisible in a room full of people, I felt something in my heart tighten, because in that moment, I realized they had already decided who I was the moment I walked in. And to them, I was nobody. After that first dinner, I convinced myself I just needed to try harder. I had moved many times before, and I knew friendships didn't happen overnight. Maybe they were just reserved, cautious with new people, or distracted by their own busy lives. So I tried. At every gathering, I made small, careful efforts to join their conversations. I'd stand near them while they sipped their wine, waiting for a natural pause to add something. "We've been looking for a good park for our baby. Any recommendations?" I'd ask, my voice light. "Oh yeah," one would reply, naming a park with a quick smile, before turning back to discuss the new interior designer she had hired for their second home. Sometimes, I tried to laugh at their jokes, even when I didn't fully understand the context of their private humor, hoping to be included. They would glance at me, smile politely, and continue talking, as if I was just a shadow at the edge of their circle. It was the way they looked at me that hurt the most. The quick glances at my affordable handbag, the subtle downward flick of their eyes when they noticed my simple shoes, the way their smiles tightened when I mentioned that I worked full-time while caring for a baby. They spoke of needing a break from the kids, planning girls' trips to Europe, and discussing expensive spa packages, while I quietly rocked my baby in my arms, my mind filled with grocery budgets and sleep schedules. One evening, while our husbands played cards in the backyard, I overheard two of them whispering, "She's sweet, but you know." "Yeah," the other replied with a soft laugh. "Different." That word stung, different. They didn't know the life I came from, the sacrifices I made to build what I had, the nights I spent studying while working late shifts, the days I spent hustling to build a business from the ground up. They only saw what they wanted to see, a quiet woman who didn't fit their mold, who wasn't one of them. Each time I left those gatherings, I would sit quietly in the car while my husband drove us home, forcing a smile when he asked, "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired," I would reply. But inside, I felt the cracks forming in my confidence, the way they chipped away at the parts of me I had worked so hard to build. I was a woman who had built a company from nothing, a woman who had employees depending on her decisions, who negotiated deals that would make these women's heads spin. And yet around them I felt small, invisible, less. At home, my husband would kiss my forehead, telling me, "They'll come around, love, you're amazing, just give it time." I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew they didn't want to know me, and maybe they never would. When I was pregnant, I spent countless nights picturing what motherhood would be like. I imagined soft mornings, with a baby cooing in my arms, walks in the park with a stroller under the sun, and quiet, tired evenings filled with a love that felt bigger than me. What I didn't imagine was how lonely it would be, living in a new city, surrounded by people who didn't really know me, who didn't seem interested in knowing me, made the days feel long and heavy. When it was time for my baby shower, I decided to host it at our home. I sent out invitations, uncertain of how many would show up, fighting the fear that I would end up sitting alone in a room decorated with balloons and untouched cake. As the day approached, the RSVPs came flooding in. Friends from across the country, college friends, old coworkers, women I had met in different cities over the years, booked flights and took time off work to celebrate this new chapter of my life with me. On the day of the shower, my house was filled with laughter and the warmth of people who truly saw me. They brought home-baked treats and thoughtful gifts, took turns holding my baby bump and whispering blessings for my child, and helped me feel like I wasn't alone. The living room was alive with stories of our struggles and triumphs, with laughter that rang through the walls, reminding me of who I truly was, a woman who was loved, valued, and respected. I didn't want to leave anyone out, so I invited the wives from my husband's friend group too. I sent them kind, simple invitations with pastel designs and a warm note. Would love to have you join us to celebrate. One left me on read. Another replied with a short, busy that weekend. A third responded, maybe, but never showed up. Only Emily, the one who always offered polite smiles, showed up, arriving 15 minutes late with a small, carefully wrapped gift. She stayed for 45 minutes, sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch, while my friends laughed and shared stories, her eyes darting around the room, as if she didn't know what to do, in a space filled with genuine joy. She handed me her gift, a plain white onesie and a small gift card, and said, "Hope everything goes well with the baby." Then she left. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, I sat in the nursery, folding the tiny clothes and placing them into drawers. I thought about the women who had traveled hours to be with me, who had loved me without conditions, who had shown up for me when I needed them most. And I thought about the wives who had ignored me, who had chosen not to show up, who made me feel small and unworthy every time I tried to speak to them. The contrast was sharp, almost painful. As I placed the last tiny onesie in the drawer, I paused, running my fingers over the soft fabric, and whispered to myself, they don't know me, they don't know who I really am. Because the truth was, they didn't. They didn't know that I was the founder and CEO of a growing company. They didn't know that while they laughed about people who don't fit in, I was the one whose decisions shaped careers, whose signature approved promotions, whose choices built futures. They saw what they wanted to see, a quiet, plain woman they could dismiss. But one day, they would find out. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I saw it. I was sitting on the couch, rocking my baby to sleep after a long morning of work calls and nap schedules, scrolling through Facebook in that quiet, tired space between tasks. That's when I saw the photo. All of them, the wives, standing together at a winery, glasses of rosé raised, their smiles bright, their makeup perfect under the sun. They were all there, except me. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the photo, as the room seemed to go quiet around me. They had planned a day out, laughed together, taken photos, shared inside jokes, and posted about it publicly for the world to see. And they hadn't even thought of me. Not an invitation, not a message, not even a casual mention. I wasn't part of their world, and they had made that clear. I felt the familiar burn behind my eyes, the sting in my chest that I tried to swallow as I rocked my baby gently, pressing my cheek against her soft hair to hide the tears that slipped down my face. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. You have real friends, I whispered to myself. You have people who show up for you. And it was true. But I couldn't help but wonder why I wasn't enough for them. Was it my clothes, my simple lifestyle, the fact that I came from a working-class family, the fact that I didn't have an Ivy League degree to casually drop into conversations? Was it because I didn't complain about a nanny or talk about my Europe trips? Or because I didn't have a designer bag slung over my shoulder at every gathering? Or was it simply that they had never truly seen me because they didn't care to look? That evening, I showed the photo to my husband, my voice steady, even though my heart was heavy. They went out, all of them. He glanced at the photo, confusion crossing his face. What, you weren't invited? I shook my head, a small sad smile on my lips. No, I'm sure it was a mistake. He said quickly, maybe they thought you were busy. Or maybe it was a last-minute thing. I could hear the hope in his voice, the way he wanted to believe the best, to protect me from the truth. But deep down I knew. It wasn't a mistake. That night, while my husband and baby slept, I sat alone on the porch, staring up at the stars, feeling the cool air brush against my skin. I thought about how hard I had worked to build a life of integrity, how I had risen quietly, how I had built a business from nothing while staying true to myself. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know the strength it took to build what I had, or the quiet power I carried every day. They didn't know that the woman they overlooked, the one they excluded without a thought, was the same woman who signed off on promotions, who made decisions that shaped careers, decisions that affected the very lives they flaunted in front of me. As I looked up at the dark sky, I whispered softly, they will know, one day they will know. The 4th of July came, and with it, another gathering I wished I could skip. My husband was excited, packing the car with snacks, sunscreen, and a tiny swimsuit for our baby. His eyes lit up as he talked about grilling with the guys, watching the kids splash in the pool, and staying late to watch fireworks. It'll be fun, he said, kissing my forehead. Please come, I want us to be there together. I nodded, forcing a smile, even though a part of me was tired, tired of pretending, tired of shrinking, tired of hoping for acceptance that would never come. But I went. For him. For us, the backyard was alive with laughter, children shrieking as they jumped into the pool, music playing softly from a speaker, the smell of grilled food mixing with sunscreen and fresh-cut grass. The wives gathered in their corner near the pool, sitting under umbrellas with drinks in hand, wearing breezy designer cover-ups, their hair styled perfectly, sunglasses hiding their eyes. I adjusted my simple sundress and carried my baby on my hip, walking over with a polite smile. "Hi," I said, settling into a chair near them. "Oh, she's so cute," one of them said, glancing at my baby before looking back at her phone. They resumed their conversation about their upcoming girls' trip to the Amalfi Coast, laughing about how hard it was to find a villa that met their standards, while balancing nanny schedules. They asked each other about spa memberships, private school applications, and luxury brand sales. I tried to join in lightly, offering, "We're hoping to take a weekend trip to the lake this summer. Just a quiet getaway." There was a pause, then a tight smile from one of them. "That's nice," she said before turning back to the others. They didn't laugh in my face. They didn't say anything cruel. But the dismissal was clear. To them, my life was small, unimpressive, something to nod at, before moving on to what really mattered to them. As I sat there, bouncing my baby gently while she giggled at the splashing kids, I watched them. The way they spoke with casual arrogance, dropping mentions of board positions they held on charity committees they barely attended, comparing luxury SUVs, and discussing promotions their husbands were due for. They had no idea that two of those husbands had spent the last month sending urgent emails, requesting meetings with upper management to discuss their performance reviews. They didn't know that the woman they thought was nobody, the woman rocking a baby in the corner, was the one who made those calls. A wave of calm washed over me as I listened to their laughter, realizing something. They saw my life as small because they only measured worth in material things and empty status games. But I didn't need their approval to know who I was. Because the truth was, their world was smaller than they thought. And one day, they would see it. The Monday after the 4th of July pool party, I woke up before dawn. While the city was still quiet, I brewed my coffee, packed my breast pump, and kissed my sleeping baby's soft cheek before slipping into my car. I drove through empty streets, the sky streaked with pale orange, reminding myself of who I was. As I pulled into the secured parking lot of our downtown headquarters, I felt the shift inside me. Here I wasn't the quiet wife. I was the woman who had built this company from the ground up, starting with a small consultancy from my cramped apartment, turning it into a thriving firm with offices across 3 states. I was the CEO, the owner, the decision maker, the person people waited on for approvals, strategy shifts, and budgets that would determine careers. I walked through the lobby, nodding at the receptionist who smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins." "Good morning." The elevator ride to the top floor was quiet, and as the doors opened, I was greeted by the sound of phones ringing, keyboards tapping, and the low hum of a company in motion. I moved through the office confidently, staff greeting me with respect, some looking relieved to see me, others pausing conversations until I passed. At 9 a.m. sharp, I stepped into the glass-walled boardroom. Department heads and executives sat around the long table, laptops open, coffee cups steaming, their eyes shifting to me as I entered. I took my seat at the head of the table, placing my tablet down, my presence instantly quieting the room. "Let's begin." We reviewed project pipelines, profit margins, expansion plans, and employee development reports. I listened, asked questions, pressed where I needed clarity, and noted where improvements were needed. Then, as my VP of Operations, Leo, shared a report on underperforming teams, a name caught my eye on the screen. David Hunter. It was Jessica's husband, the same Jessica who had laughed softly at the pool party as I mentioned our family's lake plans, who had once whispered to another wife that I was sweet but different. David's name was listed under performance concerns, flagged for repeated delays and client complaints. Leo cleared his throat. "David has requested a meeting with upper management to discuss his role and these flagged issues." Upper management. That meant me. As the meeting moved on, I sat back, letting the reality settle in, while Jessica planned her next luxury vacation and dismissed me with tight smiles at gatherings. Her husband was requesting time with the woman she considered less, and she had no idea. They all had no idea. That day, as I returned to my office overlooking the city, I sipped my coffee and allowed myself a small, calm smile. They thought they knew me. They thought they knew what status looked like, what power meant. But true power is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself or seek validation. It moves silently until the moment it is seen. And soon they would see it. Thursday arrived, the day David Hunter was scheduled to meet with upper management about his underperformance and missed project deadlines. I arrived early, reviewing his reports quietly in my office, highlighting the recurring delays, the ignored client feedback, the lost accounts. I wasn't angry, I wasn't out for revenge. This was business. A soft knock came at my office door. "Come in," I said. David walked in, wearing a crisp button-down shirt, a nervous smile on his face, holding a leather portfolio in one hand. His eyes widened just slightly when he saw me seated behind the desk, but he quickly recovered. "Mrs. Collins, I wasn't expecting." "Please have a seat, David." He sat down, clearing his throat, adjusting his sleeves, the silence in the room pressing down as he shifted uncomfortably. I opened the file in front of me, meeting his eyes calmly. "David, I've reviewed your team's reports. We need to discuss the missed deadlines and the client concerns raised over the past 2 quarters." Yes, I wanted to explain. We've had staffing issues, and I've been managing multiple projects. I just need a bit more time to get things under control. His voice was polite, practiced, the same confident tone I'd heard his wife use when she was talking about networking opportunities with her charity boards. I nodded, listening patiently. "I understand the challenges, David, but we cannot compromise our client trust, especially at the level your team is expected to perform." His eyes darted away, and I could see the tension in his jaw, the realization settling in that the woman he and his wife overlooked was not just upper management, but the final decision-maker in his career. As we discussed corrective actions, training requirements, and new performance milestones, I watched the shift in his demeanor. His voice softened, his posture slightly hunched, respect finally replacing the casual arrogance. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. Mrs. Collins, I will do better." "I believe you can, David," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said quietly, gathering his portfolio. As he stood to leave, he paused, glancing at me, eyes filled with unspoken words. After he left, I sat back in my chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I didn't feel powerful in a vindictive way. I felt clear. They had always seen me as less, never imagining the woman at their gatherings was the same person they depended on for stability, employment, and the opportunities they so freely bragged about. And now, at least for one of them, the truth had begun to surface. I returned to my work, answering emails, reviewing proposals, and scheduling leadership calls, my mind calm. I didn't need to tell his wife who I was. Life had a way of revealing truths at the perfect time. And this was only the beginning. It started quietly, a small ripple in the friend circle, barely noticeable at first. After David's meeting, the next barbecue felt different. The men greeted my husband with firmer handshakes, clapping him on the back while sneaking glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. During the cookout, while the men were gathered around the grill, I stepped out with our baby to get some fresh air. I could feel the shift in the air as a hush fell when I approached, the conversation quickly changing from playful banter to awkward silence before resuming in low tones. One of the men, Tom, whose wife had been the loudest about planning luxury vacations, cleared his throat as I passed. "Hey, hope work's going well," he said, his voice careful. "It is, thank you," I replied with a small smile, adjusting the baby on my hip. His eyes flicked to the others, who nodded awkwardly before looking away. It didn't take long for the wives to sense the shift. They were sharp, attuned to every social undercurrent, quick to notice when the energy in the group changed. At first, it was the way Jessica's eyes followed her husband as he spoke to mine, a hint of worry flickering across her face when David mentioned meetings and work discussions. Then it was the way Emily, who had always kept her distance, suddenly offered me a warm smile at the snack table. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice overly sweet. "Good, thank you," I replied, keeping my tone polite but guarded. Within a week, my phone began to buzz with new messages in the wives group chat I had nearly forgotten I was in. "We're planning a wine night next Saturday. Would love for you to come. Thinking of a spa day for the moms. You should join. We should do a playdate sometime." I stared at the messages, the sudden friendliness dripping through the screen. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. That night, after the barbecue, I stood by the window while my husband cleaned up, rocking our baby gently as she drifted to sleep against my chest. I looked out into the darkened yard, where laughter had echoed just hours before. feeling the weight of the quiet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Because people reveal themselves when they think you are nobody. And they reveal themselves again when they realize you are somebody they need. I kissed my baby's soft forehead and whispered. They see it now. They were starting to understand the truth. The woman they dismissed was the woman who could change the trajectory of their lives without raising her voice. And while they scrambled to adjust, I remained steady, knowing I had always been enough. With or without their approval,